How's it going, Mike? It's really good to finally have you on the podcast. I mean, I think that we've been trying to schedule this thing for a while now. I'm very excited for our conversation.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mike, how about we start with your background, right? What interested you about IT, or even just security overall, that made you want to go down this rabbit hole of security?
Sure. Well, I think my passion for computers started at a young age. I was able to get my hands on a couple of computers, my neighbor's computer. My parents finally bought me a computer. I programmed my own door alarm to keep my sister out of my closet and taking my sweatshirts and stuff, using a computer, a dot matrix printer, and a car alarm. But then just understanding I wanted to get into the computer field pretty early. I liked programming. I liked problem solving. I took every computer class I could in school. Um, I kind of ironically, that was not my first degree in college, or my first major in college was actually geology, and then anthropology, and then back to computers. Initially computer science, and then realizing I didn't want to program device drivers. I changed my major from an engineering degree to more of a computer business degree. And then at the same time, pretty involved with doing some contract work for the government to do intelligence type work, which really exposed me to the threat and the threat actor criminal side of cyber, where the risks are and where people are vulnerable, companies are vulnerable. So that and then working a lot of actual criminal cyber cases over the years. Led me back to school to get a graduate degree in criminal justice, and then also to teach. So, in addition to being a cyber guy, I've been in IT and cyber for almost 30 years now. I've also been a college professor teaching computer science, cyber, and the criminal justice side of forensics and some other things for about 23 years now.
Oh, wow. So it kind of sounds like to me you had a bit of a hacker mentality, getting into it, right? Even from a young age. Do you look back on it and see it as that as well? And did you potentially even, maybe notice that or recognize that at the time when you were doing all that and going through everything?
Not initially, and I think that's common with people that are curious about technology. It's common with people that are curious about technology and programming and what can computers do and how do I get into that stuff. The Tim the Tool Man Taylor version of cyber, but I definitely was. I was a tinkerer, which is really what a hacker is. How do I get this thing to do more than or something different than it was designed to do? And being able to get a computer and a dot matrix printer to actuate a bolt on my closet door so that only I knew the code and my sister couldn't steal my stuff. But so that's an example of a hack. And a lot of those similar to people that are just curious. You don't always understand or recognize the implications of your hack, of your modification, or the things you're doing until there is a consequence. There is a reckoning, if you will. And so I did one day have a reckoning. I used to ride my bike to the mall where there was a Radio Shack, and access to. I think they had three or four different computers there. And I would take my programming knowledge that I learned from this magazine subscription I had and some other things that I learned, books I read, and I would go to Radio Shack and try out my programming skills. And one day I wrote a loop, a programming loop that messed up their computer, and they asked me never to come back to that Radio Shack. So that was kind of my eye opener that, hey, I can actually do damage, and I need to be more responsible. So I learned that kind of at a young age. Growing up in a military family, when you get in trouble, there's adjudication. Let's talk about what you did and the consequence. And so I was very aware that at least at that point that I did something wrong and I needed to be more responsible with the things I was doing.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Can we talk a little bit about your degree changes, right? What made you want to go into geology and then anthropology? The reason why I ask, right, is because I remember when I was in high school and trying to get into college was like the biggest feat that I had ever tried to accomplish, right? And then trying to decide what major to go down, what area to specialize in, and thinking like, oh, I can't change, or I can't, um go somewhere completely different, right, down the line. Like if I felt that this wasn't for me, which almost sunk me. Thankfully, I I changed from pre med and went into criminal justice. Um, but what was your thought process? Because it sounds like to me that's like way out of left field. I mean, I never would have expected that, right? Like I would have expected criminal justice as your bachelor's before geology and anthropology, or at least attempting that.
Well, there were several factors that led me down those paths, and one of them, and I'm working on my doctorate, and my dissertation is on cyber workforce development, and one of the gaps that I've come to, well, I've known, but the research is actually supporting, is that there's one of the problems with cyber workforce development, and this is probably consistent with other fields as well, is there really aren't enough mentors. There aren't enough people to help educate or even have the conversation with those that want to get into a particular field. Or what do I do with these skills that I have? What kind of job would I be good at based on the things I know and can do? So there, with regard to cyber, I wanted to do something with computers, and not really knowing what these different jobs in cyber or IT really were like. Like, what is the day in the life of a network administrator or an engineer or a cyber person, or a programmer? And had I learned about the programming part of that, I probably would have never approached the computer science engineering degree at all. I didn't care to take 5 years of math, learning number theory and all these things that's not real applicable to the job I wanted. But back to your first question about geology and anthropology. So I am kind of a rock hound. I like, crystals and gems and different types of rocks. I'm always kicking around, rocks and looking at fossils, and I have a pretty cool collection. But at the same time, my mother was a college professor, and I went to school where she taught. I got a academic scholarship there, reduced tuition because she was an employee. But they had a really cool geology program, and we went around on field trips to look at dinosaur bones and dig in the dirt around Texas and Oklahoma and Arkansas. And that was just something cool that I like to do: be outside, kind of treasure hunt, problem solve. Like, all right, so here's this thing. How old is it? What's it made of? That kind of analytical stuff really fit my personality. But then I got a scholarship to play football in Kansas at a small school in Kansas, and they had a computer science program, but not enough people signed up for it to make a class. And the class would have been in like the basement of a building. I think it was only going to be two of us and a professor. So the class didn't make. So I had to take other courses until the class could recruit more students. And those other courses ended up being anthropology. So I learned about every bone in the body. I learned about how to tell someone's diet by their teeth, how old they are because of the cracks in the skull and the length of the bones, whether they were muscular. If it was a female pelvis, you could tell in general, especially the older ones, how many kids they may have had, based on different angles of bones. Is it male or female?
Hmm.
Ethnicity based on eye sockets and nose and this kind of thing. So again, pretty fascinating, and kind of that problem solving analytic alignment with my personality. But after my football career was over and I came back to Texas, really had to get serious about what I wanted to do for a living. I started being pretty independent. at that point, and needed to get serious. So was computer science for about a semester here in Texas at UT Arlington, but then was able to have pretty good conversations with some advisors and some people in industry that talked to me about cyber jobs, and that really opened my eyes and helped me refocus from an engineering program into more of a business kind of technology leadership career path, which is where I ended up.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a, it's an interesting journey. Like I feel like when you're younger, you always feel like it's going to be a straight line. And if it's not a straight line, I'm messing up.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was in college, I tried to do pre-med first. And along with pre-med, you have to take, calculus, I think like calculus 2 or something like that. And I chose to take anthropology. I was miserable with anthropology. Like I could do the labs. The labs were fine with me, but sitting through those lectures, the battle was staying awake.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that's my personality, right? Um, but it was, I mean, it was a very interesting time, and you bring up computer engineering as I don't want to learn 5 semesters of math, and I don't want to code in these obscure languages and whatnot. I actually had a friend in college that he took calculus with me, and he was a computer science student, and we were talking about what he had to do. And I mean, the level of math that you would have to go to, like you might as well just get a bachelor's in that math,
Right.
because there's so much of it. It's like, okay, you're 2 classes away from getting a bachelor's, and they're like theory classes. It's not
Mm-hmm.
even the in-depth stuff that you've been learning. And we talked about like the coding languages that he was learning, and it was coding languages that were like dead or dying, like foundational like languages. And he's like, yeah, I'm never going to use any of this. It's more of a thought process. And yeah, I mean, he spent all of his time on it. Like he didn't really go out that much. He didn't hang out with friends a whole lot, right? It was a lot of studying. And so I was like, man, I do not want to go down that path. And so I landed on criminal justice, and thankfully, because I found the work to be, or at least the coursework to be very interesting. I found it to be fairly easy, which was a nice change from pre-med. Trying to learn chemistry and fail it not as bad as others, right? So you're ahead of the curve, which was the craziest thing to me. You get a 30% on a test, and that's an A with the curve. Like
Wow.
it's like I clearly do not understand these topics, and you're giving me an A.
Well, that is common, and I'm right there with you. I did have to learn 7 programming languages when I was in that computer science program. I did kind of develop the same thought around not just programming languages, but that upper level math. Really, it's just designed, in my opinion, it's designed to help you approach and solve problems in different ways. It teaches you different tools for approaching a problem, maybe some shortcuts, some ways to analyze a problem. But really, you're going to get to the same answer. It's just shorter math than well, in some cases, it's shorter math. Some of that calculus is front and back page or multiple pages, but yeah, it just that's kind of where I ended up with the math. Was it's just this is just teaching me different ways of problem solving. Some of this is just ridiculous. In fact, I remember sitting in a calculus, an upper level calculus class, and I was doing well on all the daily work, but and I actually tutored other students on some of the homework and things. But when I got to the test, I just blanked. And it's like you have 2 hours to solve 4 problems. I mean, that's indication number one, you might be in the wrong room. But I remember on one particular test, I actually wrote my professor a note apologizing for not not knowing how to do this problem, and that hopefully it doesn't reflect on his ability to teach. It's really just my ability to sit for this test. And so I did a 1-page apology note for that question.
Wow. Yeah. Like, calculus wasn't even. So for me, I enjoyed calculus, right? Like, I always think that if I wouldn't have landed on criminal justice, I would have actually gotten a bachelor's in math because I enjoyed it so much. Um, the problem was that same semester I was also taking chemistry and physics, and you know either of those classes are like learning two different languages of how to
Mm-hmm.
solve problems. And I mean, chemistry isn't even isn't even English as far as I'm concerned. um and so I really didn't have that much time to study for calculus, but thankfully I was in this advanced like study class or whatever it was, where the first day the professor's like, these are going to be the most difficult calculus problems you'll ever encounter, and so when you get the final, it's going to be nothing for you. And I didn't believe him because you hear that sometimes and it's just not true. But 100% it was true. I got to the final, I didn't study at all. There was 5 questions, I whizzed right through it. And I ended up getting like 80-90% on it. Like
Wow.
I scored well above everyone else, and it was pretty easy. I was the first one done in this lecture room of like 250 people. So I wonder, I probably would have gotten a bachelor's degree if I didn't convince myself my only path forward was criminal justice.
Yeah,
But
and being the first one done in a large room like that is kind of unsettling. Also, like, did I do it right?
oh yeah, I mean, I was done so quick. I looked up and no one else was done, and I was like, oh wait, I must have
Mhm.
messed something up. Like I had to have messed something up. So I checked it over for like quite a while, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I answered everything.
That's
And
funny.
but but yeah, it was fantastic. I enjoyed it. I'm always tempted to go back just for a couple classes in math. That's just me though. Um, so so you ended up getting a IT business administration degree. Do you think that set you apart and prepared you for your career in IT in different ways than what computer engineering or computer science would have? And the reason why I asked that question is because I feel like too often people go into IT thinking, okay, it's going to be all technical, it's going to be hands on keyboard at all times, and I'm going to have to be a developer and things like that, right? Well, there is this other option. It's IT with business administration. I have a friend that actually got his master's in it, and it sounds like that could be a different path. Is that true, or what was that like?
You're right. And so, just to back up a little bit, while I was working on my, well, back up even further. I've got an associate's degree in math because I really like math too. But then when I was working on my undergraduate, and it was actually an information systems degree out of the business school at University of Texas at Arlington, but because it incorporated so many computer courses, and I did have some of the programming courses completed, I was able to select whether I wanted the degree to say Bachelor's of Business or Bachelor's of Science. And so I selected Bachelor's of Science. So my degree is actually out of the business school, but it's a Bachelor of Science in Information Systems. But I had to learn all the business stuff. I took business law, ethics. Man, I can't remember all. Marketing was one of the electives I took. Money and banking, just other business stuff. But the the time during going to school for the undergraduate degree, I was also had my own computer business. So from for 7 years, for 6 years, I had a consulting company where I would teach companies how to use Microsoft Office and do spreadsheets. And, I also did, basic computer maintenance, network cabling, troubleshooting, cleaning keyboards, that upgrading computers, that kind of stuff. And so I had exposure to the hardware part of it. I was building some experience running my own business, being a consultant, customer service, doing my own accounting and financial forecasting, and having to buy equipment and this kind of thing. And then I got my degree I got my degree and wanted a corporate job, thinking, and at the time, even back then, probably equally or maybe even more so than today, there was that requirement for an undergraduate degree or some unreasonable amount of job experience in order to get hired. And so as soon as I graduated, I think I graduated in August, but I was applying for jobs over the summer. So in July, actually was selected for a job as an IT auditor. I've never heard of that position. I knew what an auditor was, but I didn't know what an IT auditor was. And so a lot of the interview questions were around my familiarity with hardware and technology, but really they focused mostly on my ability to go research and find the answers. And if I don't know the answer, how good am I at collaborating and asking for help and this kind of thing. And so I started that job, and that was definitely a business side job. My job was to go into a company. So I worked for a $5 billion telecom, big international telecom company, and my job was to ensure that the technology departments and people and things that the business relies on was following company policy and regulatory standards. And are there any weaknesses or risks that could impact the operations or the finances or the reporting of the company? So I learned quite a bit, not just from what's this audit thing and how do I become an auditor? And it has its own disciplines and procedures and things you have to follow, quality and documentation, all this good stuff. But there was a very strong and critical component of customer service and diplomacy and tact. Because back in the day, when an auditor showed up, it was because someone was trying to get you fired. So they're here to find the problem with me, so that they can justify firing me, or you're taking time away from a job I already don't have enough time to do to answer your questions, so you're putting me behind. And so audit had a bad reputation. And so you had to come at that very diplomatically. I'm here to help. You say you don't have enough time in the day to do your job. Well, maybe I can highlight that in my report, and maybe we can get you some part-time help, or figure out a way to make your job, help you do your job better, more effectively, type of thing. So that taught me quite a bit. Soft skills, communications, report writing. I had to do presentations to the board. And it was during that time at that telecom that I realized that one of the biggest risks to this $5 billion telecom is they had zero security from a network perspective. They had a firewall guy that looked at firewall alerts and rules, but nobody looked at the company as a whole to figure out where bad things could happen, or maybe they are and nobody knows. And so I worked with my boss in the audit department to talk through that. And we actually came to the consensus that we need to do a presentation to the board about the need for a cybersecurity specific group. And so I put that together and pitched it to the board, and they told me that I was the one that was going to make it happen. So that was my first foray into a formal cyber job. I built that company's first cyber team, and eventually even incorporated physical security, doing executive protection and flight, trip, travel, threat and risk planning. A lot of stuff happened. A lifetime of experience at that telecom, but that's what got me into like a true cyber position role, and I haven't looked back since.
Hmm. Yeah, you bring up a lot of different interesting things. Part of it is the ability to do your own research and find your own solutions without potentially having to, escalate a problem or
Hmm.
reach out to other people and whatnot, right? And I remember earlier on in my career, I was interviewing for a job, and a question came up. How would you solve a problem that you don't know anything about, that don't understand? My first answer was, I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to look it up, see what other people are encountering with it, how they're resolving it. Try that. If it doesn't work, I'm going to ask a colleague.
Hmm.
And the hiring manager was actually very against me saying I'm going to go to Google, right? And this is mid 2000s, right? So like Google was established. Google was something that you would use to resolve problems and whatnot. And he was very against it and didn't hire me because of that. And I thought to myself, like, well, if you're not going to hire me because of that small little thing, then I probably don't want to work for you. And two, you're not very forward thinking if I can't even use the internet to solve a problem. Like, how am
Hmm.
I supposed to, right? You want me to go into a log file and try and decrypt what Microsoft is saying about an error message that is, dug into this thousands of lines of log file? Like, it doesn't make any sense. um and another thing that you bring up, you sold the incident response, or kind of disaster recovery um process to the board. And it just reminds me of a time when you got to be careful what you ask for, because you're going to be faced with doing that work.
Yeah.
And I didn't quite understand that until, I was working for a company as an application specialist. I was trying to get into security. And so I understood the security part, pretty well for where I was at, right? I was the only one at the company with a security mind that cared about it and whatnot. And I pitched it to my VP, like, hey, we should really actively be securing this application a lot better. This is how we can do it. Look at all these vulnerabilities that I found and everything like that. And I mean, his only response was like, you know what? You're completely right. You should do that. And I was like, wait a minute. So I have to do everything else too? And he goes, oh, yeah, you got to do your normal day job stuff. And now you got to do this security stuff that you want to, that you want to explore. When
Yeah.
I was thinking of like, oh, let's get, a bunch of people around this to work on this from different teams and different perspectives. It's like, no, you're doing it. So you got to be careful with that.
Certainly. I no, completely agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess fast forward a little bit, when you were working for the government and looking at the different unique types of attacks and learning about them and whatnot, what were some of those unique attacks at the time, at least, that maybe you didn't see in the private sector? Were they solely unique to the government, for like, what I would think of as, nation state attacks and whatnot? Like, was there unique things like that, or was it kind of dispersed in a way where, yeah, it was targeting public and private infrastructure and things like that?
Well, a lot of the work that I did was on the human side of intelligence. So a lot of the tactics I used and a lot of the scenarios I was involved with were all more social engineering,
Hmm.
getting places you shouldn't be, obtaining information you're not meant to have, utilizing people and processes to as stepping stones to subvert or circumvent security controls, mostly physical, but ultimately, there were some technology, some technical controls that you needed to get through or get past in order to get information. So that was kind of my foray into cyber, was understanding a lot of the human risk involved with the technical controls that are put in place to protect stuff, because it's still people that configures it, implements it, runs it, has access to it. And so that was a huge perspective and learning experience for me. That unlike others that get into cyber, they learn all the technical stuff first. I was able to have the experience of learning all the human risk first, which I think gives me a little bit different perspective when talking about risks to clients and companies, because you can get rid of all your technology. I mean, if you're able to, but you're still having to do business with people, and people are always your biggest risk, your biggest weakness. And then you give people access to your technology, and so it just gets worse. I think the joke about the most secure computer is the one that you don't turn on or plug in. It's encased in cement and it's dropped in an ocean somewhere.
Hmm.
But then you can't use it, and I think that's the paradox with security: is the more secure something is, the less usable it is. And I kind of joke that that's why convenience stores are robbed more than banks, because security is really just a hindrance. It's not an absolute. If something was absolutely secure, you couldn't use it. So you've got to find the balance, and that's something that I think that experience with the intelligence contracting work I did really helped me understand sooner than later.
Hmm. Yeah, that's different. That's a different approach than what you normally hear. You normally hear about people going down the technical side rather than the human side.
Hmm.
I've actually never done the human part of it, but I was talking to Jim Lawler from the CIA, and he was talking about how technology and security minded governments and organizations are getting really, really good at security. So the likelihood of a cyber attack actually being pulled off against someone that is very much prepared for it is very low, actually. It's lower than what we would think. And the most vulnerable part is the people part, because you can, like you said, right? You can secure a system, you can air gap it by powering it off and unplugging the thing from the network, right? And now you have a whole bunch of sensitive data that's secured unless you have physical access.
Hmm.
And that unless part is the people part, you know?
Yep.
And so it turns into a very interesting problem to have. And I remember when I was working with the government a few times, and one of the people that I was talking to, I brought up that part, right? Because to me, an outsider, I'm saying to myself, well, how in the world are these people getting bought off? How are they, selling secrets and whatnot, right? Like it doesn't make any sense to me. And he said, you know, th- if someone can find out that you work for the government at a certain facility, right? They start to do their own checks into you. They start looking up your credit report. They start seeing where your debt lies, and if you're going to make enough money to actually pay off that debt within a reasonable amount of time. And they start you off very small. They say, hey, just give me a name of someone that works at your facility and I'll give you 10 grand to pay off your medical bills, and they snowball you like that, where you get
Right.
comfortable with getting the money. You don't feel like you're betraying anything, when in all actuality, it's building up to a larger betrayal, right? You may have not betrayed very much by just giving a name, right? But now they know one more person that works there and they're going to be targeted and things like that, right? And so the human part, I feel like, I don't want to say it's evolving, but I want to say it's becoming more prevalent because of the need to actually go down that path where we have, secured our networks to the point where it's like, yeah, this is really secure in most cases.
Hmm.
Um, and the the only thing left is actually, buying these people off and giving them money to live an easier life while they're betraying their country. Is that what you saw as well, kind of?
Not so much on the recruitment side. Mostly what I saw and the things that I did was to try and figure out, to kind of the nth degree. You're really playing out and kind of mind mapping almost all the relationships between what's the target and everything involved with that. So, for example, if you've got an air gap machine that's got the prize data on it, well, where is that machine? What facility? What are the controls around that physically? Who are the people that have access to that thing? What are the procedures for them to get access to it? What kind of work do they do with this machine? What are their hours? Who are they related to or work with? Where do those people live? Who are their neighbors? Do they have kids? Where do they go to school? And to your point, everything about their lives, their credit, their criminal history, their clearances, the car they drive, how much they owe on stuff. Where's their family? Do they have online social media? Where do they eat lunch? All those things give you kind of an attack surface and relationships so that you can start to plan out. All right, so I need to compromise the home network of Bobby down the street because Bobby plays with Jim's son John, and they're both pretty active on mobile devices. They have phones and tablets, and the likelihood that Bobby's home network, because his dad's a school teacher, I'm able to compromise that to get malware on Bobby's tablet that he takes over to John's house. And, kids are always like, hey, can I join your wireless? And so now Bobby's at John's house and he's on their home network, and it's his dad that works with the guy at the lab. And so if I can compromise their home network and then put some malware on something that dad takes to work, now I'm introducing, malware to work, or something that collects information for that next phase of my attack, but maybe introduces it to coworkers, and then eventually it makes its way into that air gap network. Or doing enough reconnaissance, and maybe they post who their vendors are and the types of work they do, and I just show up and pretend to be a contractor, and here's what my work order. I already know what the work orders look like, and social engineer my way into the building, which maybe it's an adjacent room. And, kind of one of the things that we have is if I can touch it, I can own it. So you can encrypt it, you can chain it to a desk, you can do all these great things. But if I can touch that device, if I can physically interact with it, then all of your technical controls go out the window.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, is this kind of where the experience with working with the government, is that where you started to go into, with your work with Black Swan, and what are you doing, at that company? What is that company? How are you guys operating, and what do you specialize in?
Well, I've worked with a number of companies over the years, telecom, financial, some of the biggest banks. I was the director of threat and vulnerability management with Price Waterhouse, doing consulting and incident response. But along the way, I always had this entrepreneurial itch, and so I've had several technology companies over the years, and the last two have been cyber specific. And at Black Swan, which is the most recent and the most successful, we are a full life cycle cybersecurity company. So we help organizations understand the need for cyber, how to design and develop cybersecurity programs. So that's policies, procedures, the right people, skills, partners, vendors, coverage, technology, and a lot of that's based on the risk specific to that organization. So we can help them through that risk assessment process as well. We help them ensure that they're compliant with regulatory requirements like credit cards or health or financial data, or if they're a publicly traded company, all these different compliance regulations. Or if it's just a best practice standard certification like ISO 27001, or helping them get their SOC 2 Type 2 type accounting based certifications. And then naturally, out of both of those initial engagements, you've got these opportunities to improve. There's a gap. You don't have the right people. You don't have the right technology. You don't have any policies and procedures. You don't even know kind of where you want to start and where you want to be, that maturity roadmap. So we can assist them with remediation and training, developing custom or putting a process in place to do scheduled automated training. And then from that, obviously, you want to test. You want to make sure all that stuff is effective and not just a point in time, but throughout the year or year over year. So we do those traditional assessments as well, whether it's an audit or a network security assessment or a penetration test, and we do that on buildings as well. So part of, again, if I can touch it, I can own it. So you can invest a lot in cyber protection, but if your physical security is lacking, then you've misallocated, at least misproportioned your security. So we do physical security assessments also, trying to get into buildings where we shouldn't, trying to get to restricted access. Trying to get to restricted areas of the facility where important stuff is, whether it's documents or technology. And then along the way, testing the security awareness and response of the people. And then, giving them recommendations for improving both the technical side and the people side. And then in the event that there is an incident, we have an incident response team where we help manage a data breach or a theft of a laptop or an employee that stole data. And then part of that naturally is forensics. So being able to do digital forensics and support that incident response investigation. But then also if it ever goes to court, we do expert testimony. And then at the core of our business, we have a 24/7 fusion center where we monitor client networks, user behavior, device behavior 24 hours a day. We're all U.S. based out of North Texas. We're all U.S. employees. All the data stays in the U.S. And then we call it a fusion center because all of those things that I mentioned from start to finish are available to people 24 hours a day, in addition to a lot of threat intelligence that we collect from government agencies and vendors and other sources.
Huh. Well, that's really interesting. I mean, that's a pretty expansive business that you've built. Do you ever point to any one experience in your career that really prepared you for what you're doing now, or is it kind of a conglomerate of the experience that you've had throughout your career? Kind of coming together and culminating with this company.
Well, I think there's a lot, and there's several parts to it. So a lot of what got us to where we are the relationships that we developed over the years. So having relationships with people that are auditors, having relationships with people that are hackers and educators and forensics, and having the experience of building a fusion center and knowing how to staff it and build the culture of the company that supports like-minded individuals that have that passion, not just for protection, but also collaboration and teaching others is one thing. So over the years, building those relationships and becoming friends and professional acquaintances with just a large number of awesome people is part of it. The other part, and one of the reasons that we kind of have services that fill that full life cycle, is the struggle that I've seen both on the corporate side as the consumer of services, but also on the provider side, where a customer or a vendor isn't the single phone call. A lot of organizations, when they have a problem, they've got to figure out 5 or 6 different service providers or vendors to call to help solve one problem. And then on the provider side, on the professional services side, there's a struggle with working with a client, and your service doesn't satisfy enough of the objectives of the problem. And so what we wanted to do with our organization is not only be the one phone call. So we have an 800 number. It's 855 Black Swan. So you can call us 24 hours a day for whatever your problem is: technology, cyber, flat tire. That's kind of our joke. But the idea was give clients one phone call to an organization they can trust, and they know that we're here to help them fix whatever problem that is, even if that doesn't involve us. So back to the flat tire joke, we say you can call us if you have a flat tire. We're not going to be the ones to show up and fix your tire or tow your car. But if we're the ones you called, we'll be on the phone with you and help coordinate the tow truck, the AAA, whoever it is that needs to get there to help you fix that tire. And so similarly on the IT side or the technology side, clients call us because a network broke or somebody stole something, or they need to know who we know that we trust that does some XYZ thing. They know they can call us, and we'll figure out the right solution and get them in touch with the right people.
Hmm. That's a really interesting business. Where do you where do you envision that going and growing in the next 18 to even 36 months?
Well, that's something that we've put a lot of thought into just recently. We do enough to keep us busy, but we're always looking for opportunities to expand the value. And some of the value that we've seen most recently is in that traditional IT support area. We need to buy new computers or build a new network or troubleshoot problems with printers and wireless access, or we need help managing our Office 365 environment. So those aren't things that our organization currently does directly. If someone asked us for that help, we would point them to a partner that we trust. But we seem to be getting a lot more interest in that area. So we've started talking through the idea of growing through acquisition of some of these complementary type services. And so maybe acquiring or partnering more closely with, merging with some of those traditional IT support vendors, so that they've already got relationships and adding value to organizations with the services they provide, which are just naturally augmented by what we do, and vice versa. Whenever we're providing our cyber services, very often we find some of these technical things that need to be fixed or implemented or changed. And again, that's not something that we typically do. We would partner with someone else to do that. And so those kind of managed IT services and skills would naturally complement the things that we do and the problems that we typically find.
Hmm. It's really interesting. Well, Mike, we're unfortunately running out of time here. I really try to honor my commitment time wise. When I say it's a hour long interview, it's an hour long. you know. Um, Before I let you go, how about you tell my audience, where they can find you if they wanted to, potentially reach out to you or connect with you, and then where they can also find your company.
Certainly. So I'm on LinkedIn. It's the only. Well, I also have a Twitter account, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I love to connect with and collaborate with people, especially on the education side. If you need help mentoring or finding a career path, happy to help. We also have an intern program at Black Swan, and it's blackswan-cybersecurity.com. Our phone number is 855-BLK-SWAN. Reach out, contact at blackswan-cybersecurity.com, which is also a form on the website. But we're here to help and educate and collaborate. Happy to connect with anyone.
Awesome. And I'll put all of those links and sources in the description, of course. Well, thanks, everyone. I really appreciate you listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode.